And the main thing that I implemented was what I attribute to is the priority of values. Very few people actually sit down and look at what their values are.
Mm-hmm.
Or if they do, they don't really look at the order of those values. And to me, that seems to be the secret of success or failure in my own definition.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of people may say, right, they value financial success highly, yet they value their well-being not so much. So then they compromise their well-being by working 20 hours a day or whatever it takes, and neglecting their health to the degree that there's a joke that sort of says, oh, you spend all this time trading your health for your wealth so that later you have time to give away your wealth to get back your health. To me, that kind of didn't make any sense whatsoever again. So that's why every person's definition of success is unique to them. And there was a concept back then called Wheel of Balance or Wheel of Life. And it's a very simple diagram. You basically look at your different interests and values, and you put a point out of 10 on those values, and you draw a sort of a line around those points. And some people end up with a pretty jagged kind of a radial diagram that, imagine if they poured a little bit of fuel onto it and tried to go faster, and the car crash that some of those individuals end up having. So I wanted to avoid that. I didn't want to have the experience of the guy that went broke 4 times. That was, to me, again, another little thing that, yes, I have heard that some business people have gone bankrupt and then they come back 10 times more and better than they did. But in the meantime, they created a pretty serious car crash in the first place. It may have cost them family. It may have cost them all kinds of things. So how do I navigate my own pathway through that? Tony Robbins, lots of other books were instrumental in me trying to understand, how do I apply myself? Where do I need to get better to then be better going forward?
There can be a bit of a risk there, like reading that amount of books as well, right? Because it's, I think a lot of people read these self-help books to feel better about themselves, about having a shelf full of self-help books.
That's right. Sure.
And it's just glossed over.
Correct.
I've definitely been guilty of that.
Yeah.
And it's, how do you take it to that next level? How do you choose which ones to, take massive action on and implement in your life?
Yeah, great question. I try to go back to first principles in my own definition. What to me that means is the person that had written a book had gotten then learning and knowledge from somewhere else. So where did Tony Robbins get his learning? Where did the person before that get their learning? Books like Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, those kinds of books. I go back to those kind of classics because whilst they may not have had really polished lessons in those books, that was the raw information that allows me to digest it in my own way.
The first principle.
Yeah, rather than letting somebody else process it and then here it is on the plate, which is another reason why whenever I see self-development speakers, if they're early in their journey, I'm much more likely to go along and listen to them rather than if they're later on. Because by the time they're later on, their product becomes so polished that it becomes incredibly difficult to break through that wall.
The lesson becomes, the product they're selling becomes the product that they're selling. And it becomes...
Correct.
The next book in their journey is how to make $1 million, and that is to write a book on how to make $1 million.
Absolutely.
So it'd be very easy to be very cynical about all of these. So you talk about going back to first principle. I would say that most, if not all of these self-help books could probably all go back, find a root cause in How to Win Friends and Influence People, which is probably the top selling self-help book in history.
Absolutely.
And that's still being evolved now. I think the Carnegie Mellon Institute is still evolving that book.
Yeah. Look, there's obviously lots of different areas of where we can get better, whether it's business life, personal life, etc.
Yeah.
If you apply that first principles thinking, you're much less likely to be caught up with a person who's going to sell you the fish rather than teaching you how to fish. And to me, that's the key, because I'm not going to learn from a person that hadn't been to where I'd like to go to, for starters. They may have some theory, but ultimately, when they put that theory into practice, that's where real life feedback comes in. So
is their book, is their instruction just an interpretation of 3 other books, and they haven't actually done anything with it?
Correct.
Yeah.
And they're a great talker or a great seller.
Yeah.
And through my time in getting out there and learning how to be in business, I've met hundreds, if not more, people that were doing stuff. Property developers, builders, architects, all kinds of property-related people, as well as in the self-development space.
Yeah.
So most of them are on their own journey, whichever level they want to be at. And I'd also met some pretty serious car crashes where they'd gone out, they'd applied some theory, they'd gotten some early goals, and then had tried to accelerate those goals further and didn't have the substance underneath. That became my real sort of point. How do I build that substance without just trying to be, promoting an idea that I hadn't experimented on by myself? So leading back to how to choose a book, super important to choose a book from in an area that I'm actually working on, that is going to be immediately relevant, that I'm able to take at least one lesson out of and apply that lesson out of it. I met you through the Entrepreneurs Organization,
that's one of their methodologies,
which is a great place to meet amazing people. Again, the challenge becomes that how do you decide which thing to implement? There are so many ideas, so many strategies. They all sound so cool. These people have done it and they're successful. Great. How do I do that?
But typically that's a product of their own effort, and it's 10% the book they chose. I presume that is the case. I mean, I haven't read many. Well, I have to be honest, I haven't read any self-help books.
Okay.
But I've tried to surround myself with people who then impart that knowledge by having conversations and learning from them. The arrogance of my youth, and most of us have, I thought, well, it's business. I either have a widget or I'm going to create a widget and I'm going to go and sell a widget. What's there to it? It's cool and everyone wants it. So, and years later, I'm still thinking, never sold many of those widgets. Maybe I should have read a book. So I want to ask, of all these books, so we're talking about this journey, your journey, and the books that you picked up and you've read a lot, and you've been to these seminars. A young person today, couple of case points. So let's say we've got a young person who's starting a business. It doesn't really matter what it is, but they're going to provide a service, and it's a tough environment. There's either a lot of people doing it and there's not a lot of demand. Fresh out of university, starting that process, deciding to start a business because there's just not enough. All the jobs are taken. They could go the way I went, and that is, got a widget, trying to sell it, can't sell it. What do? I'll get a job, and I'll just won't stay in that industry because it's now dead to me, or I don't have any opportunities. Is there a course or a book? A book's going to be a lot cheaper than a course. Is there something? What process would you suggest to that young person to either read, attend, or participate in? It's very broad, but it's meant to be broad to give it general.
Let's step back a few steps. That person may have had a dream. They may have had a vision for what their life would look like. How clear are they on that dream? How clear are they in that vision? How much do they want it? Is the next question. Before they can choose a book or a course or anything like that, the difference is strategy and tactics. Strategy is where we're looking at helicopter level. We can see lots and lots of things up in advance, but that's the bit we want. Tactics are in between. Courses, books, all of those kinds of things to me are tactics.
Yeah.
Strategy, it's tactics for breakfast.
Yes. Yeah.
Well,
let's assume that this person does have a vision. It is something that they must do because it's inherent in their nature, in their concept, and they've done all this stuff to get up to this point. So we're talking about this graduate or 1 or 2 years in. That I think that's the person that I'd like to use as a case point. So they're passionate, they're definite. This is definitely where I'm going. What do I do now?
How badly do they want it?
Well, let's say that more than mostly anyone else. And let's assume that this is definitely where they're going and they're going to put everything, absolutely everything into it. So this is the direction. Have
they thought about what it's going to look like at the end in terms of how they're going to impact? Is it going to be their immediate family? Are they going to have a family? Are they going to be just a single person? What is it that they are prepared to sacrifice? What is it that they're prepared to commit to long term? And how badly do they want it? To me, it's quite simple as when the student is ready, the teacher appears. If we take that kind of universal attitude, then I feel that I'm quite intuitive in the way I go about doing things. It is almost like I can be in a space and look at books, and then that book will pop out as the next book.